Hey guys, welcome back to Medical Coding with Blue. Today's episode is all about the road to becoming a medical coding auditor and some of the pro skills that you need. If you are brand new to my channel, welcome. I am Blue, I'm a medical coder. All right, so you want to be a medical coding auditor. I think above all else, when I start talking about the pro skills, I will say this first. To be a medical coding auditor and to be a truly effective one, you really do need experience, because the medical coding auditor is going to essentially be telling people all day long that yes, you are correct or no, you are incorrect. And it takes a special person to be able to do this, because I have seen many medical coding auditors take a lot of verbal abuse from coders who just don't understand, and then sometimes the medical coding auditors just gives up and gets very frustrated, and you see a very lively discussion, to put it mildly. The thing about being an auditor is you have to be able to get everything neutralized, and you have to be able to explain why you got your answer to a very upset coder. And you want to do this in a way so that the coder understands that you're trying to help teach them. That is essentially what an auditor is, aside from being very detail oriented and really understanding and knowing all the rules. It's very important to be very effective, and to be effective, you're going to be able to pass along your knowledge. I have been audited by people who have their degrees, and I have been audited by people who have just their certifications. And sometimes auditors take it personally when coders find something that the auditor didn't know, and then when they try to pass it on, I have been scolded by many a auditor because they didn't know it and they don't like not knowing something. We're human, and auditors are no exception. They are human too. And the thing about learning and being able to teach is being effective in your communication. And how do we start by doing that? It starts with having experience. And that is like one of the #1 pro skills that you need as an auditor, is to have that experience. Now, the reason that I say experience before education, right? Education is very important. Please don't get me wrong, all right? Education is extremely important. But having experience and having gone through that process yourself and knowing what it's like to be audited and knowing some of the key things that you know that you would not do as an auditor is really important when you become an auditor. Now, I have trained many new coders myself, and I have audited the codes that they have selected. I have audited the procedures that they have selected, and I've had to go in and train them. This is not correct because of this. And it does take a very special approach to be able to do that, because again, you don't know that person's background and you don't know how they're going to take it. And being an auditor, you're going to be talking to people of all ages, people that are older than you, people who have had experience for years, and people who are just fresh into the field, that you want to be able to grow and cultivate those relationships with new people and with veteran people, so that they want and welcome your direction. And that's really, really important, because I have seen where auditors, they say, well, you know, it's right because I say it's right. No, you have to be able to show your reference. You have to be able to show how you got to that. And you have to be able to help that coder to understand why, so that they don't continue to make the same mistakes. A whole facility's accuracy is dependent on the coders, yes, but namely on the auditors, because the auditors are going to be able to catch those mistakes quicker, because a coder may be coding along thinking that they're doing it correctly, and they have read it, they believe they understand it, and then when a auditor who has experience comes along and says, no, wait a second, it's actually this way, they're like, oh. So it does happen. Now, my boss does not have a degree, but she has her credentials. And we have gone back and forth. And of course, when she's auditing me and I get my audits. And so there's been things that I have learned from her, and there's been things that she has learned from me. We have both had very spirited discussions, and we have had to have a neutral third party come in and be able to break the tie, because when one believes that one is correct, one is going to come with all of their resources, right? And that is the one thing that I do as a medical coder, is I always have to have my resources. I know and I understand the importance of it. Not all coders do this. So that's why it's important, even as a auditor, that you train these coders to be prepared. Now, I naturally came prepared because that's the way I have always been. That's the way I've always understood. And I was very surprised when my boss says that she likes this about me, because it's not always the case. Now, when coders don't understand that they have to bring their resources, they can't just say, well, it's right because I say it's right. That's not the way to be. You have to learn this. And again, part of the reason that I do my channel the way that I do, because I want to show a comprehensive approach to what medical coders and medical coding is for us, right? You have to know all of these details, and it's going to set you up for success when you follow these things to help support your arguments or support whatever codes that you selected. So it's one of those things that you have to really think about, you know, and it can't just be, well, I'm the auditor and whatever I say goes. You have to be willing to put your own pride aside, because of course we all have pride. That is something that is ingrained in all of us. Some have more pride than others. But I have seen where I have told a auditor before, well, this is correct because of this, this, and this. And they have gotten mad at me because they said, well, I'm the auditor, I should know. Yes, but you're human and you can't know everything. So being humble is another key pro skill. You have to be humble, because if a coder is going to tell you, well, yes, I've had experience in this clinic before, and this is actually the correct codes, and this is actually the correct procedures, then you as an auditor have to say, well, you know what? They're correct. And that's right. It's not just about being so steadfast in what you believe. It's really a lot of give and take. So communication skills are another pro skill that you have to have and be prepared for as an auditor, because again, auditors go through a lot. I mean, I admire auditors if that is their sole function for that facility, because of the simple fact that they have to look at codes all day long. And while they're not abstracting, they have to look at what others have abstracted and make sure that it is correct and that it is to the highest degree in detail. So it is important that you have had experience with a variety of clinics. I've had one auditor who had internal medicine experience but didn't have experience with a lot of other clinics. So she did struggle. And the reason that she got the position was because she had her degree, but it didn't necessarily make her the best candidate. So that's why I'm telling you guys, if you have your degree, that's great, but really concentrate on getting that experience first, so that way you know. And getting experience in a variety of clinics, again, is going to prepare you for that time when you want to be a medical coding auditor. Because your experience as an auditor can really shape an entire generation when you think about it of coders. Teachers are extremely important. Education is extremely important. And the fact that auditors are the coder's teacher. Yes, we're all supposed to know, we're all supposed to be trained and things like that. But again, if a coder is not cultivated to know that they are supposed to do this on their own, they're supposed to do their research, they're supposed to do all of these extra things in their own time, it is on the auditor to say, you don't want to make the same mistake again. So this is what you have to do. Here are some resources for you. And they have to be able to not take things personally when coders get upset and when they think that they're trying to gang up on them. It's not the case. It is about putting pride aside, and it's very important for coders to be able to do that as well. When you are being audited and the auditor is trying to tell you this is the correct way and they're giving you the resources, you have to listen because they go through a lot. And I think sometimes people don't think about that because people think that when there's any sort of disagreement, that it's personal and it's about them. And that's the thing that gets me, because it's not always personal. Sometimes, yes, and we're all human, okay? So I will put that out there. But for the most part, if you're disagreeing with somebody, it's not necessarily anything against them. It is the fact that maybe there's not a full grasp understanding, or there's not knowledge on either side, right? It could be either case, right? Either person may not understand something, right? So that is one of the things that you have to really think about. So it is such a good position to be in, and especially if you really enjoy doing it. If you have passion for what you do, it will show. And when you audit somebody and you find something that you know, if you teach this coder this, it's really going to help them in the future. It's going to make things easier for them. They're not going to struggle as much. If the coder is willing and receptive and receives that, that is what is going to really ultimately help both parties. But it starts with the auditor. Because yes, while the coder should be just as receptive to the auditor, it is the auditor and it is on them to be ready and like, okay, this is what I have to give you. And this is the reason why. If you always come with the reason why, a coder is going to understand that it's not personal. And even if you have to tell them, look, this isn't personal, because sometimes people have to be told literally that this is not personal. And it is about learning, because you want to make sure that everything is correct. But meet the coders halfway. Be willing to do that. If you feel that they're better learning visually, then give them something visually to look at. If they are better with it in writing, that kind of thing, then that's totally fine too. But find ways and understand, really know, and that's a have the knowledge. I mean, to really understand each individual. This is why I say body language is very important. People have been like, really, Blue, body language? Well, think about this. When you are talking to somebody and you're teaching somebody, you're going to notice one of two things. Either they're engaged or they're not engaged. Either they're receptive and they want to listen to you, or they're not. So if you see that a coder seems to be disengaged, then perhaps you need to change your approach. This is the same thing that I tell coders to do with their providers when their providers are just kind of shutting down and they don't want to hear it. It is about being very confident and sure of yourself as well, because if you back down to a coder who is getting upset and perhaps they are getting very spirited, spirited meaning little voices are raised. If you find that, don't just back down because they're getting upset. If you have to have a timeout, then there's a timeout, because sometimes you have to take a break. And sometimes because people get so lively and worked up that sometimes you have to say, we got to do a timeout, because it's just better for cool heads to prevail. So that is one of the things that you're going to have to be able to call when you do that. So, but being an auditor is a wonderful thing. I mean, honestly, it is, especially if you're willing to get in the trenches and help and teach, because that's ultimately what it is. Nobody wants to be marked wrong with the same error all the time. And if you find that the coder is struggling, then help them with resources. And even if you say, well, that's not my job. It's not my job to do that. See, that's the wrong way to think about things, because that's not being effective as far as like, well, this is the person that's telling me that I'm wrong. If all if all auditors had the same training, right, then they would know, because like I said, I've had many different experiences. I've had good auditors and I've had bad auditors. And I've had to train an auditor that I had. And so when I had to train an auditor that I had, because I had experience in that particular coding, I had experience in Profi coding, and she resented me for it. And I could feel it every single time we had an audit, because she would tell me that I was incorrect, and I would show her in the guidelines where it was that I was, where my thought process was, and how I was able to come up with this answer, and she would get upset. And the thing is, it's not my fault that she didn't have experience in it, but she shouldn't have taken it out on me that she would give me so much resentment. But it's a lesson learned with her. So that was the thing. And there's going to be times when a coder is going to have more experience, or they're going to maybe be brand new and they know more because they've been freshly trained and maybe they had a good instructor. It all goes back to that. And you know, medical coding, the health information field, is so independently learned a lot of times. Even if you have your degree, it is very much independently learned. Because we are often working out of workbooks, sometimes there's not a lot of critical thinking that gets taught. And that critical thinking, guys, that is another one, that is another pro skill. That teaching critical thinking is different from just teaching. Because if you teach the people the why, the how, the who, the what, the when, the where, that's all critical thinking, rather than it's this way. If you start teaching them those details, you're going to have coders that are more well-rounded. You're going to have coders that are going to be able to understand more. But again, it starts with your ability to communicate, and communicate well, and being humble at the same time, because yes, you do have the power to have this person's accuracy really high or in the toilet. So that's not something that you should take lightly. That is something that you should take very seriously, because this is a person's career. Coders, and it's a small world. Yes, there's thousands of medical coders. But as I have learned recently too, well, no, I can't say recently because it's been going on for months, but everywhere you turn, there's somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody else that knows you. And so because of this, you know, your reputation does get around. So if you are auditing and you have this, oh, well, yes, it's because I say that they're correct or they're not correct, you have the ability to have a huge impact on somebody's accuracy. And if they are truly inaccurate, you have the ability to be able to help them. And I always believe in giving a hand up rather than trying to push people down. I never believed in that because I don't think that that's fair. There's a lot of room for all of us. And because of this, I always believe that you give people a hand up. And if they're falling, you help them. And yeah, you may get snapped at a few times because maybe people are not used to that, or they just don't want the help. But you know that you tried. And so that's the important thing. You know that you tried, because it maybe in some small way that will motivate that coder to do the research on their own. If they don't want to hear it from you, that's totally fine. Not everybody is going to be as receptive to hearing from other people. And sometimes it's not anything that you did. It is just the person. And there's really no reason sometimes why, but that is just something that happens in our career field. But again, having that pro skill of being humble and not taking things personally is really going to help you. Yeah, I know that a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about today kind of mirrors Friday's episode about the 7 pro skills, but in auditing, it is a little bit different because it is coder on coder, right? It's not in general. It's not in, you know, coder and provider, or coder and somebody else, is some other ancillary staff member. I mean, it is literally coder on coder. So as coder on coder, we should be able to understand in speaking to each other that yes, we are a team, and it takes a village to bring up a good and high caliber medical coder. I have many people to thank in my journey at being a medical coder so far. I have auditors that I can thank for that, and good and bad. Good and bad because I know what it takes to be effective, and I know what not to do. That is what coders that have auditors that have not been the best have taught me, is that there's a good way to go about things, and there's a not so a good way, not such a good way, right? Not so a good way. Oh well, you guys know what I mean. But that's essentially what it is, and really having that really strong background in medical terminology, anatomy, and pathophysiology is huge. Above all else, too, you really have to know the body. You really have to understand the disease process. I cannot stress that enough, because really that's where it all begins, because you're going to be able to spot things that a coder who is just generally going through is not going to be able to see, because you're a lot more detailed, because you understand this stuff. And if you've never worked in those clinics that you're auditing, which I've seen that before too, if you've never worked in there before, then you need to get on the ball with having to study, and perhaps looking at the internet sites for that particular specialty, or whatever the case may be. Or even if it's family practice, there's also family practice websites out there that talk about coding, that talk about the things that they do. And auditors really should be asking questions to the providers as well, if they're unsure, and if you have that sort of open door policy in your facility or in your doctor's office, that you can talk to providers, because that way you can really truly make sure. Because I've had, like I said in the past, I've said in past episodes, I'm gonna say future, but past episodes, I've literally talked with providers and sat down with them and literally asked them, what goes on in your visit? And being able to find that stuff out, I was like, oh, okay, well, we need to start seeing this, because, they said, well, we don't get credit for it. Yeah, you do, And so that's the thing. Not that you're doing CDI, because obviously a person who's doing auditing is in their own special thing, but it does help the auditor to understand like what actually goes on in that clinic. And it's very important, because how can you truly understand what's going on in this documentation if you don't truly understand what's happening in that clinic? And so that's why I say that that's very important. So, but if you are going down this path and this is what you want to do, I say welcome, because it takes a very special person to be able to be a medical coding auditor, and to be humble and to be a good teacher is really a tremendous thing. And it is the ability to be able to impact a whole generation of medical coders, and be a good force for information, and be a good force for just having that bridge, being that bridge, and building those relationships with fellow coders, because we were all there. We all know, and we should all be able to speak to each other. So that is always the goal. But realistically, well, we can all work towards it. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up. That's my video for today. But I hope you found value in this. And if you did, I hope you'll subscribe, because we are inching our way to 10,000. I am so excited. Hopefully we will be 10,000 by the end of the month. I will be so glad and so grateful. Gonna keep my fingers crossed, but I'm really excited. So I will see y'all tomorrow for the #1 question and answer show about medical coding, airing on Tuesday, Q&A Tuesday. So I will go ahead and wrap this one up. If you are a medical coder, a medical coding student, somebody curious about the fascinating world of medical coding, a provider, or a nurse, I invite you to like and subscribe and follow me on my journey in medical coding. I will see y'all next time. Bye.